Welcome back to Magic Hour, my loves. Taylor Page here.
And I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
This episode is so exciting because the telepathy tapes have taken the nation by storm. Claire, have you listened to them yet?
I haven't. I'm so excited to start. A friend reached out last night, which was so funny synchronistically, and was like, "Have you listened to these?" And I was like, "Oh my God, we're literally talking about them tomorrow." So, yes, I need to dive in, but I can represent the audience member who hasn't listened, doesn't know what it's all about, and you can be the more informed person today.
Yes, you're the audience member that's like, I'm super interested. Tell me more.
Exactly.
It's so cool, and I go into it more in our interview, but it's basically this study of telepathic links in nonverbal autistic people and how they establish this like telepathic communication with their primary caretakers. And not always their primary caretakers, but usually. But there's also this study of like savant syndrome. I think it's called a syndrome, but it's really like a gift. And it's basically the work of Dr. Diane Powell looking into these children who are like, playing Mozart level piano from a young age or can speak languages that they've never been taught. And basically, what they're realizing is they never had to learn it. They're just being told it because they're tapped into the spiritual realm. So there's so much cool, juicy information. I was getting my hair cut a few weeks ago, and my hairstylist, Anna, and I were like deep diving into it. And it's so cool because even just in talking to like her and other people, this is speaking to people because it's spirituality based in evidence that people can understand, not just these woo woo concepts that are floating out in a cloud. It's like, no, there is actual physical evidence of nonverbal autistic people knowing things that they should not be able to know and giving messages and contacting people in different states with accurate information. Like, just such cool stuff. The whole series gave me so many chills. And I feel like it's a part of this evolution of consciousness. And I feel like the time is now. And it's part of the North Node in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, like all of this Piscean energy that we're navigating on a collective level is this like deeper spiritual awakening, and Saturn grounds it into the material and the logical and the rational. And then also Pluto in Aquarius, like Aquarius speeds things up. It's like this evolution of consciousness. It's asking us to get the lesson quicker. And it's asking us, like, when we're saying we are all one, that includes neurodivergent people on the spectrum, not just people who are out here, like, living their quote unquote normal everyday life from a neurotypical perspective. And so I feel like these souls came in to be teachers for us. I get into that a little bit in the episode, so I won't go too much into it now. But I love the way that these tapes have been hitting home with people and resonating with people. And it's also this element of witch wound healing, which, if you aren't familiar with the concept of the witch wound, listen to episode 103. But it's basically this wound in the collective consciousness where it's not safe to be different. It's not safe to be powerful. It's not safe to be inconvenient. It's not safe to be other. And it's not safe to have a different spiritual perspective. And it's not safe to be magical. And honey, life is too short not to be magical, first of all. I always say that. But I feel like these tapes are giving people the confidence to come out in the light because so many people have had these experiences and felt shushed or dimmed or denied and gaslit about it, that it's like this powerful strength in numbers that cannot be ignored. And I think trying to restrict science to just the scientific method might be a little bit outdated. There might be ways that the scientific method can be updated and expanded to include paranormal phenomenon. And that's what I love about these conversations.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And I mean, it must feel super validating for you because I feel like it's the same thing to a degree that you've been tapping into and accessing. And so many of us who are tapping into our clairs, and I think you're right. It's like, I've at least been feeling it in my life, but I feel like so many people I know are expanding their consciousness in ways that, at least for me in my circle, I didn't feel like was happening 10 years ago. And I'm meeting more and more people like you. I mean, obviously, through the podcast, we meet so many people like this, but that has been really expanding of like, oh, it's not just Taylor who's having this experience. Like, so many people are having this experience. And I think it makes perfect sense that someone who is differently abled would have a different relationship to these types of things than somebody who maybe is relying more on their sense of verbalizing things. You often hear about it with, for instance, like a blind person or someone who becomes blind, that they feel their other senses strengthen in these deep ways of like, they can feel that someone is near them even though they can't see them. And so it just makes perfect sense to me that that would be happening with people who are differently abled and just, oh my God, the like ramifications of this information, like what it means that this is happening and what it means for what is possible. Of course, going back to what you're saying about science, science is just a way to describe what's happening. So science will have to catch up to the fact that this is happening. And how do you weigh and measure that when our usual tools or the tools we've been using can't really apply?
Yeah, and I feel like this could just open the can of worms in so many different directions. And I gave this message a while ago, way before the telepathy tapes came out, that I got excited because I feel like science is catching up to magic. And it'd be interesting to go back and see which episode that was on because it might have been like when those tapes were about to come out or something. But I think that it's a really exciting time. And I think that there are like so many endless possibilities. Something that was really interesting to me about the telepathy tapes as well was two factors that I really personally felt connected to. One is that a lot of the spellers, which that's a term I use throughout the episode. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a term for the nonverbal autistic people who have to spell out. And that's their way that they communicate. Like they have a little pad with letters on it and they can spell things out and type. And the things that they share are like these profound, deep spiritual truths. It's so amazing. But something that they overwhelmingly report on is that they were scared as kids. And that's how I felt too, because when you don't have this knowledge, it's like, what's happening? What am I experiencing? Is this normal? It like puts you basically into your prey drive because even though these spellers are at a higher consciousness, they're still in a human body. That's why they're not like fully ascended masters, but they have this ability to be like, oh my gosh, I'm tapped into something. There's so much more. And I just need the tools to express that. And so there's just this like solidarity that I felt with them in that sense of being really scared as a kid, not wanting to sleep with the lights off, like all of those things. And I hear that time and time again with a lot of people who are tapped in and who weren't taught what it is. And it's not that the spirit world is scary. It's that just like from almost a perspective of just a animal being on this planet feeling watched triggers your survival mode senses. And the other thing that really stuck out to me about this series is the theme of feeling other. And growing up, I was from a very small town. There were like so few kids in my class because we were such a small town. There was like 8,000 people in my town when I was growing up. I basically went to the same school from preschool to 8th grade. And very early on, it was decided that I was not cool. And it was easy for me to be bullied and asked out as a joke and just treated so horribly and excluded. And I do feel like that sense of being othered contributed to my intuitive opening because I spent so much time alone and in silence and just in the presence of nature and my guides and a higher power. And I was a very much like a daydreamer. I would very much be in my own world a lot of the time because the real world, the material world felt so painful to me. And I've never really shared this, but there were even moments where I thought about ending it all because I was so bullied. And there was like one time where I like attempted that and I saw my soul like shoot out of my body a little bit and myself from above. And I was like, I can't leave my mom. And I came back. But there's that feeling of like a lot of psychics and mediums have had intense things happen in their childhood and it does shoot your consciousness out for a little while and then I think you touch the spirit world in a different way when you come back in. And I found that with the telepathy tapes and Adriana even says this in our episode of there's a lot of trauma for people on the spectrum. There's a lot of feeling other. And I think that changes our consciousness and our perception versus somebody who has always been accepted and has never had to question or open or look for anything else. And I just found that to be really powerful because in the telepathy tapes, there's an episode of the talk tapes, I think it's called, which is like a follow up after season one, but it's not season two yet. And there's somebody who was sharing his experience and he got to go to the hill, which is like this place where everybody gathers. And he was seen as an ally and a safe friend to take to this hill and to show the hill. And he was saying that he thinks part of the reason he could get there was that same sense of him really understanding what it is to feel other and to feel excluded. And that he grew up in a place where he was bullied as well. He also battled, I can't remember now, but I think he had cancer, some serious illness, and that he like went through a bunch of health struggles. And I do think that you don't have to have those experiences to open you up, but it's just an interesting theme throughout the series of how feeling othered and excluded from the status quo and like the community and going through these intense traumas in your life, like the spirit world has your back through that and you might open up to a different consciousness through that.
Wow. It just breaks my heart to hear that, Taylor. But also, what a beautiful way that you alchemized that painful experience and to recognize that it tapped you into your gifts in a deeper way. And I think that's true. I'm even feeling that way on my healing journey where I'm like, wow, this trauma that I'm carrying with me or this wound that I haven't healed, it's like looking at it is helping me to be a stronger me. So I think it's really amazing to see how even really painful experiences like that can really bring us home to ourselves and hone our gifts. And it also just made me think what you guys talked about on the episode about how there's a lot of pain and trauma for these children. And I think sometimes it can feel difficult to know how to connect with a child that's having that experience or a child that's nonverbal. I remember I had a classmate growing up that was on the spectrum and would get bullied a lot because he was othered and he just was odd compared to everyone else. He just would express himself differently and carry himself differently, and it was hard at that age to know, like, how to receive it as I was also just still trying to figure out who I was. But I think as adults too, when we're in space with children like that, or when we're in space with anyone, even if we don't really know how to engage with this person, we can send love and light non-verbally and send them that energy, and it appears that is felt. And I know that in my own experience, I can feel that from other people. So just offering that up to people for whatever you're dealing with, whoever you're dealing with, but especially if you're in relationship with children that are hard to understand, know that even a nonverbal act of love can be felt for them and will probably make a difference.
Yeah, and that's what the parents on the telepathy tape say too, which I love the parent side of this. Like the way that the mothers, there are dads involved too, but especially on the tapes, it really features a lot of strong mothers that are fighting for the rights of their children and know that their children are so gifted beyond belief, but just not in the way society looks for gifts. And so they're really fighting for that. And the mothers say, like, the way to help your child that is a speller is to do your own spiritual work and healing because they feel your heaviness, they feel your despair, they feel your frustration with them. And it's easy for them to internalize that, like they're not wanted. And they even hear your thoughts because they're telepathic. And so they were saying, like, I work on being like, okay, you might feel that I'm frustrated, but I want you to know I love you. It's never about you. And starting to get to a place where you become the observer of that inner villain voice and get to a lighter place in consciousness already is such a healing force for people who are super energetically sensitive. And as you were speaking, I got this message that came through that was every single person on earth feels other in some way. And even the people who are like popular and bullying other people, they might feel like the other in their family unit. Their dad might be mean to them, so they come to school and be mean to you. And so it's a universal experience to feel other in some way. And it's just, are you going to take that otherism out on other people and continue to perpetuate that cycle of wounds? Or are you going to take that otherism and let it expand you in compassion, personal power, and deeper love?
That's so beautiful, and I totally relate. I definitely felt othered. I was bullied for having red hair, which seems so silly now, but at the time was like a big deal, and yeah, it's such a beautiful way to look at it of taking that painful experience and almost helping it to like tune into your uniqueness because in a beautiful way, we want to be unique. So our otherness is part of our superpower and not this negative thing that as children we feel like, oh, we need to be part of the pack. If we're not part of the pack, then we're left out or whatever. And then as we age, we realize I get to be my own pack. I create my own safety as an adult. So I can be free to be my beautiful, unique self and still be safe and still be accepted. And when you were saying what the parents will do for their internal monologue, I just thought was a really powerful practice that we could put into play for ourselves within ourselves. So when we get frustrated with ourselves or sad, like we can say, okay, I know I'm feeling frustrated, but it's not about you. I love you. I'm just feeling sad or I'm just feeling frustrated.
Yeah, like that reparenting inner child work. And that's what I think is so beautiful too. It's like everything we talk about on this episode with Adriana, the spiritual toolbox, the healing, the understanding, the creating safe space, like these things can be applied for every single person, every single child, every single inner child. So I just can't wait to share this conversation with you all and to introduce our guest. Adriana Parrish is a holistic healer, intuitive medium, and mindfulness educator dedicated to bringing transformative wellness practices to individuals and communities. As the founder of East Bay Healing House, Adriana specializes in Reiki, sound healing, and intuitive energy work to support emotional resilience, self awareness, and deep healing. With a profound ability to connect beyond the physical realm, Adriana integrates her intuitive and mediumship gifts into her healing practice, offering spiritual guidance and deeper energetic alignment for those seeking clarity and transformation. Her work extends to children, particularly those on the autism spectrum, where she uses sound therapy, mindfulness techniques, and energy healing to help them develop self regulation, focus, and emotional balance. Welcome, welcome, Adriana. Adriana, welcome to Magic Hour. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Yes. So I put out on my Instagram, I asked the community, should I just talk about the telepathy tapes in a little intro or a section of a listener question episode, or should I do a full deep dive? And the response was overwhelmingly deep dive. And a hummingbird reached out to me and was like, I have the perfect person to be on this episode with you. And it was you. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
So, the first question that I always ask our guests is what is your big three, your sun, moon, and rising?
So, Gemini, Aquarius, and Scorpio.
Ooh, what a interesting and powerful combination. So, you're a Scorpio moon?
No, so Gemini, Sun, Aquarius, Moon, and Scorpio rising.
Okay, nice. I'm a Scorpio sun, so I can vibe with you there on that level and working that Gemini sun, connecting with people, working on the interpersonal level, speaking, teaching, doing all the things. And then your Scorpio rising, like moving through the world as this healer, this mystic, going deep. And then that Aquarian humanitarianism and intuition. I love the fusion of all of that together. And it's interesting because in your big three, you have two of the signs that get really demonized, which as a Scorpio, I can relate. And I'm like, enough Gemini and Scorpio slander. You guys are so boring. Have a different opinion.
I know. I feel like they're always just coming for us, right? Geminis and Scorpios.
I know. And to be fair, and I'm not trying to be sexist, but I feel like sometimes it's more of like the Gemini men, which I've had my own experiences with. But I'm like, leave the Gemini women alone.
My husband's a Gemini.
Oh my gosh. My first boyfriend ever was a Gemini. And honestly, it's just every single sign can have a shadow side and a healed side. And if the Gemini energy is healed, it's unmatched. So much fun to be around Gemini energy.
No, it is, but we are like two opposite Geminis. We have banter all day. We're sending articles, just random facts that we may know, but we definitely are on different ends of that Gemini life.
Yeah, so interesting. And so the second question that I like to ask every guest is how does your intuition speak to you?
Oh, wow. So it's my sense of knowing and then sense of seeing. So what is that? Clairvoyance and claircognizance. But definitely my gift of seeing is pretty strong and comes through for me quite a bit.
That's awesome. I was just speaking to my mediumship mentor about how true clairvoyants are rare. Like to really have the gift of clairvoyance is rare. And so I think that's really interesting. And the claircognizance makes perfect sense with your Aquarius moon. I feel like Aquarius is just this lightning bolt of knowing something. And claircognizance is one of my main clairs too. So it's almost like when you're working with someone or when you're talking, there's just this sense of, for me, like getting stimulated by something, and then that triggers a knowing in me, like reading a news article about something, and then I'll get a knowing or a download about what this means for the collective or something like that. How does your knowing show up for you?
Yeah, it's very similar to yours, right? Or it feels like it works simultaneously with the clairvoyance. So if someone's telling me a story, it's like I'm there and I can see like colors, the space, the room. I can just see what's going on. But the knowing, I don't know, like I always follow this feeling right in here, right? That like intuitive feeling. So when I get this hit right in here, and it's like it all lights up for me, and I'm like, okay, then it's a go. I have friends that actually may lose their wallet or their keys, and they're like, where? I can't find my wallet. Where is it? And I'm like, hold on, look in the car, in between the seats, and it's there.
That's amazing. And for those of you listening, not watching, she was pointing to her heart when she said that's where the intuitive feeling. And that's so interesting because in my mediumship circle, I have a friend in my circle whose specialty is finding lost things. So that's its own branch of actually intuitive gifts. So that's something really cool, like can be developed to missing persons and things like that. So that's cool that you show that ability naturally.
Yeah, I have little ones, so they lose the remote often, right? And they're fighting. I don't want to watch this. And I'm like, hold on, where's the remote? And same thing. It comes in handy in daily life.
I love that. And nobody has given that answer yet. So I'm always so excited. Like the point of this question to me is to expand everyone's idea of what intuition can look like because we're all on different radio waves for a reason so that spirit can work through us all in our unique ways. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background and how you got into the work that you do, and specifically what led you to working with kids on the autism spectrum.
So, I mean, my whole life I've had this gift. I didn't know it was a gift and I didn't know it was mediumship until much later. But having this knowing and these visits and knowing when someone was getting ready to pass away and really learning and knowing early on in life that as someone was perhaps being born into the family, someone was getting ready to depart. And there was that. And then when someone would go, I would get these visits from loved ones, and it was always in the same room. I always knew that it was for a very short amount of time, and their mouths wouldn't move. It was like telepathic communication. And so it was like I didn't catch on to those things until later. I just knew, oh, here we are. We're in the same white room. They're visiting. And so I would always ask, did you see this? Did you have a chance to look at this? And so it was like a visit and very heartwarming. And so that was from childhood. And then going into adulthood, I still had that, or just the knowing would come in, or friends would seek advice. And I was like, I just knew. And I would say around 2018, I ended up losing my mom in a car accident and I became a new mother. And during that time, I like went into receiving energy healing and really expanding upon what that looked like. I was raised Catholic, and so that was definitely not a space and a place that I ever considered venturing into. So it felt very wrong. I was like, oh my gosh, can I do this? Is this okay? And during that time, it was as though I was being placed in the right places at the right time with the right people, seeking mentorship and learning and really finding the words, like the name to the experience, right? Those dreams, they weren't dreams, they were visits, like really finding out more about what that was. So I actually became attuned to Reiki and I wanted it for myself, for my grieving and all of that. And then I went through to master level Reiki, all of that good stuff. And then sound healing. Sound was a really beautiful and special way for me to process my grief. And I had like physical ailments to go along with it. And I ended up opening like a Reiki practice. I was still working in what I did at the time. So, like, once a week, I was seeing clients, and I was like, can I do this? What is this? And that really opened it up. As time went on, the clients that were beginning to come to see me, I knew like the mediumship readings and all of that. I was like, I don't think my gift is meant to be like love readings. I enjoy them, but I don't think that's what I'm here to do. And I had a lot of clients that were parents of neurodivergent children. I was seeing therapists, speech pathologists, educators that were in the space working with children. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing that these are my clients. And so it went from the parents, the educators, the caregivers, that support team to the children. More so, it started with sound and offering sound baths and then letting that be a medicine that really spoke to them. And being able to see that, I can't even articulate like that. I'm pointing again to my heart because you could feel it just open up. And I could
Mm.
feel, I could hear, I could see, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. This is a language for them. This is not just sound. Like for us, it feels a certain way, but this is doing something completely different. So as time went on, the work went on, I use like mindfulness, holistic therapies, Reiki, and sound. And it was so beautiful, just that journey. And a friend of mine reached out and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to listen to this podcast." And I was like, "What is it?" And so she told me about the telepathy tapes. And I was like, yeah, I know this. This feels familiar.
Wow, full body chills as you tell your story. First of all, I'm so sorry for the passing of your mom. I lost my mom in 2021, so I can really resonate with that. And it's so hard. And it's so interesting how losing someone in the physical world sometimes is a conduit to our deeper development. Like, I think birth and death are like these two times that the portals are open to the spirit world and it changes us. And like, when we birth someone new, we are reborn. And when we lose someone that was so important to us, we are reborn because we're a new version of self that is who we are without them here in the physical world. And so I think that's like when people don't believe in spirituality or aren't attuned, it's like if they become a parent or they lose somebody close to them, that's when they're in a place where maybe there's more potential for opening. And you already were open and it just pushed you into this next level. So I think everything you're saying is just so powerful. And so it's interesting too, because my mom, who passed, was in her early part of her career a special education teacher as well. So just all really tied together. And I think it's also really interesting how you were describing seeing past loved ones when you were younger. So that was that clairvoyant experience, like you would actually see them. And it gave me chills because we're here to talk about the telepathy tapes. And you were talking about them telepathically communicating to you when they passed over. And I just love that. So let's get into the telepathy tapes. So, the telepathy tapes, for anybody who is not familiar, is a podcast by Kai Dickens based off of the research by Dr. Diane Powell. And it's basically deconstructing the tenets of materialism. They talk a lot about how, as a collective society, we're so materialist. The scientific community is very materialist, meaning we only value and take seriously things that we can interact with our five physical senses in the material world, and things that are of the immaterial spiritual world are dismissed. And so this telepathy tape deep dive research by Dr. Diane Powell was experiments with nonverbal autistic people who create telepathic links with usually their primary caretaker, but it can also be the people who assist them on their spelling journey and communication practice, people who work with them in therapy or as a teacher. They create these telepathic communication links. And in the study, they would take the nonverbal autistic person and they would take their primary contact who they have a telepathic connection with and separate them and basically ask them questions or show the person who was their primary contact like a crazy long number or a random sentence from a book. And the nonverbal autistic person would then recite it because they could telepathically see it in their person's mind. And they blindfolded them. They did all of the things that they could to basically show how legit this was. It was really interesting because one of the people helping out on the podcast was a skeptic. And then it completely changed his life when he saw the evidence and the proof. And in this spiritual work, I'm all about evidence and proof. If you're going to talk to me about things here, like where's the evidence, where's the proof? And that's what I love about the telepathy tapes is that there's so much evidence and proof. And I love the idea of science kind of connecting and catching up and pushing consciousness forward because I think science and magic are just two opposite sides of the same coin. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what your initial feeling was. Like you said, yeah, I know this. This is familiar. This is so right. What was your initial feeling when you listened to the telepathy tapes and what really resonated with you from your personal experience? And have you ever worked with somebody who is nonverbal autistic or are you more with people on other sides of the autistic spectrum?
Okay. Yes, I'm so excited. So when I first listened, I wasn't even 10 minutes into the first episode and I had goosebumps. I was driving in the car and I was just talking out loud, like, oh my goodness, yes. Because being in that space, being around the parents, being around the children, you immediately, I don't know, I can't really openly have this dialogue necessarily with everyone in the school, right? But some of the parents, we talk about it. But when you are open spiritually and you begin to do this work with the children or adults or even anyone that is gifted in this way, there's this feeling that comes over you because you automatically see it differently, right? So, as I was working with my clients, my client load started to change, and I knew immediately, I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting ready for this shift in who I will be working with. And so, that's what happened. It was children on the spectrum. I had clients with like cerebral palsy and just different ailments. And I heard immediately, you are not going to fix them. It is not your job to fix them. And I was like, okay, what am I doing? And it was, you are just holding this space to give them a time of rest and understanding. And I kept hearing that. So as I did the work and as I was doing the sound or as I did Reiki or whichever way it came in where I was holding space and doing that work, that's what I did. And so there will be moments where I go into a space and I'm not communicating verbally, it's all energetic. Or I know before I get to the location where I'll work with that child or individual, I will know, okay, they're not having a good day today. So we're not going to do sound, we're going to do Reiki. We're taking it easy today. And I'll even hear, maybe we need to spend more time outside today. So I go with it. I'm just being led in it. So I have seen more neurodivergent children in sound baths that are nonverbal. The one on one work is more so with children on the spectrum that are verbal. And so it shows up in different ways in different spaces. But I have been in spaces where the parents communicate, oh my goodness, she is really enjoying this. She's really enjoying this time. And she's like, I can see from her body or her reaction. And so I'm so in tune with the sound and I'm just kind of hearing the messages and I just flow with it. But yes, so it's children along the spectrum, I would say. But there are a couple of kids that I work very closely with that are verbal.
Okay, amazing. And with that work, have you either spoken to parents? And I understand this all has to be anonymous, so feel free to express this in a way that is good for you. But have there been situations that you've had or heard from with parents where that telepathic communication has come through, or like the child on the spectrum is more spiritually in tune or gives a message? Like, have you had these experiences for yourself or heard of them firsthand?
So I have. So there is someone that I work with, and oh my goodness, our relation, it was like this was maybe the week that the tapes were introduced, which was to me, and I had just started, so I didn't do a deep dive in, but we were together one day and I was working with her and had just started working with her mother, and her mother really fought to get me to do this work with her, right? One day she was talking to me and she was telling me about this place that she goes to at night. And I lit up, right? And I turned around and I was like, where is it? Tell me about it. And she's like, it's like a place where I go and I learn and they're teaching me. And she's describing it. And I describe back to her because I'm seeing it. So as she's telling me, it's like I'm being placed in this space. And so I'm describing to her what I'm seeing. And she's like, yeah, have you been there? And I was like, I've not been there, but I'm seeing it as you're telling me this place. And she was like, yeah, I go there at night and I learn things. And sometimes I remember what I learned and sometimes I don't. And it's not so clear, but I go there at night. And in that moment, I was like, so I'm trying to like contain myself. I didn't want to push too much. I mean, they will tell you as they want to and when they trust you. And yeah, so our sessions after that actually took a really beautiful turn because I was like, this is why I'm here. This is the whole reason why I'm here. And so, yeah, in those moments, it was like, I let her know, I believe you. Yeah, I believe you. And she looked up at me and was like, you believe me? And I'm like, I believe you. I believe that you go there. I was like, I want to learn more. Do you know how amazing this gift of yours is. So doing the work, and especially with the students that are verbal or the children that are verbal, they have verbalized that being autistic is extremely challenging and that people don't understand the challenges that they face on a daily basis, whether it comes to learning nutrition or just how they show up, right? So to be able to be around more people that have an understanding, you can see how their faces light up and how they feel like, oh, you see me.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And so when she was talking about where she goes at night, do you think she was talking about the hill?
I don't know. As I listened with an open ear, I was like, is this when it got to the hill, I was like, is this the place she was she was talking about? And I don't know that it's the same place. I know later in the tapes it does describe another place that some of the other children go to, and it is like a learning space for them. To me, it felt a little more in alignment with that versus the hill. But when I did hear on the tapes about the hill, I have no doubt that does exist because just the being a child and seeing the telepathic communication, having my own gift and working with these children and parents and educators, it's felt like these things that to be a thing finally came into the light.
Yes, I love that. And it's so interesting to me, this idea of the hill. If you haven't listened to the telepathy tapes, it's basically a place that a bunch of different nonverbal autistic people have described to their primary like contacts that they spell out things to or speak to telepathically. It's this place that they go to usually at night where they're like, "Don't bother me, mom, like I'm going to the hill." And they like go in their room and they meet up with their friends, they learn things, they share information, and some teachers and people in the space that really care to develop spiritually have even gotten to go to the hill. And that was a really interesting thing to hear about on the telepathy tapes. Like they have to go into like almost a deep hypnosis state to reach that place. But even the idea of the hill is such an interesting idea because the hill suggests to me an elevated consciousness. Like you reach a higher consciousness and you are on this hill where you can look down and see so clearly everyone else's consciousness. And it's not a mountain, it's not Christ consciousness that's just like ascended master, but it's a hill, it's above and it's higher and it's connected to something. And I found that to be a really interesting metaphor and describer of that state of consciousness. And I think what's really interesting about this whole thing, just like you, when I was listening to the telepathy tapes, I just had full body chills for so much of it. It was just resonating so deeply. And just like you, it's these things that seem obvious and like they should be understood, but that it's being brought into the light in a big way. And it's just so powerful. So I've like in my own intuitive readings worked with clients who were the parents of kids on the autistic spectrum at different levels. And one time I was tuning into this mom who was asking about her son who was a nonverbal autistic kid. And the message when I tuned into him was like, I came here to help progress consciousness. And the other message was, I came here because my soul this time around didn't want societal expectations. I wanted to do things in my own timing, in my own way, and to explore the idea of authenticity in a completely different way. That if I was quote unquote able bodied or not nonverbal, I wouldn't be able to do. There would be like different expectations on me. And I found that to be a really interesting idea when I was listening to the telepathy tapes because to me, being part of a patriarchal capitalistic society, what do we value? We value work and productivity and achievement in the material world. And we value like birthing workers for capitalism. And to me, valuing nonverbal autistic people for their spiritual connection and knowledge and as teachers, it goes against everything we've been deeply societally programmed to value. And that's like a big part of the evolution of consciousness to me, is how we're being pushed to be like, no, actually, we're valuing the spiritual, we're valuing the wise, we're valuing the depth that these savants have to share with us.
Absolutely, Taylor. Those are my exact thoughts as I'm working. Well, with the parents, it was like coming into it and hearing I remember thinking, what would it be like to be a parent or a caregiver of a neurodivergent child? How much, how you'd have to view life differently, but also the space that you hold. And so doing readings or Reiki and holding space for the parents, the teachers, teaching actually Reiki and all of that it was a beautiful experience because I think we often forget the support that's needed for them. But to work with the children, it's like your heart opens up, your mind expands, and your soul is like, what it feels like, yeah, that the ability to go into the consciousness that far in depth, the way that they do, the way that the nonverbal, I feel like you can resonate with this. So as we expand on our gifts and we seek mentors and teachers and we do these things to really meditate and connect, it's like that is just their way of being. So for the yous and the me's in this world, it's like this is this individual where we can connect and just really the gifts that we have, we get to exercise these gifts and it feels like there's a lot more meaning and purpose behind why we are these mediums in between the two to be able to facilitate whether it's a modality to bring this soothing, this medicine, or whether it's the ability to be able to know and know, okay, this is what's going on and to communicate. So it's such a special space, and I think when I got into doing Reiki or sound or just holistic therapy and work, this was not something I thought I would do, or I had no idea. If someone would have told me like 10 years ago, this is what, you'll venture into, I would have been like, no way. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it was the exact same for me. And there's just this sense of like it all being orchestrated and we just have to surrender to it. What you said about how your clients and the children that you work with, you can just feel their vibes, you can feel their energy when they're off, what they need. I believe that telepathic communication, like that is telepathic communication as well, because they don't have to tell you and you already can feel how they're feeling. So there's already this sort of connection there. And I think that language, specifically for the nonverbal children, but for people on the spectrum too, language can get in the way of intuitive connection. And I gave this message a while ago before I even heard the telepathy tapes that silence plus time equals spiritual connection. And I think that sitting without language for a long time opens us up to a place where we're just open to receive. And I talk a lot on the podcast about this idea of how the brain, I'm quoting Dr. Raymond Moody here, that like the brain doesn't create consciousness, it's a filter for it. And I think when you are not on the spectrum, those filters are a lot louder. You filter everything through this ego story of who we are in the world, how people receive us, XYZ. And I think that spirit speaks a language of love. And you don't need words for that. And that's where words can actually get in the way and complicate things. And like beings on this planet that are less concerned about dialogue and words and speaking and judging everything, I feel like exactly what you said, are in this state where it's just natural to them to speak that language of love and be in alignment with that language of love.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It is very heart centered, right? It is about love. And there's so much body language and just listening with the body. Even when there are children that are verbal, there are still a lot more moments where we are in silence versus in conversation. And it's just showing up in energy, how you're showing up with your energy. So the grounding is always very important in that. And just even what we're bringing in, right? Because there have been moments where I've had one of them turn to me and they're like, "Are you okay today?" And I'm like, I am okay. Just there was a lot of traffic on the way here or something. And when I can tell that they're very concerned. So it's an energetic exchange that's transpiring between the two, like right even before you arrive there.
That's what I was just going to ask next. Have there been times with the children that you work with have read your mind, or are there stories that you have of ways that they've given messages to you or guidance to you?
Yeah, so I had a continuum of that conversation about going to the school at night. I remember she asked me after, she was like, "Have you been there?" I was like, "No, I'm just seeing it as you're describing it, but I'm seeing it like it feels like it's tucked away in the woods and I'm seeing trees and like this light." And she turned to me and she's like, "I think you have been there." She didn't know, doesn't know about the mediumship or anything like that, right? She's like, "I think you have this gift where you just know things like an oracle." And I was like, "Whoa, I'm not an oracle." But she was like, "Yeah, how do you just know what this place is?" And then she went in to tell me more about her gifts, about like her ability to see and like spirits and things of that nature. And I was just like overcome with, wow, this is really amazing because she's not the only one, right? She is not the only one that is having this experience that is also has these spiritual gifts, but is not in a space with people around that are supportive that can really hear her out.
Yeah, and that brings me to the parents, and it's really interesting because having a child with these, like, telepathic abilities and the evidence that they present and the spiritual connection and the way that they challenge materialism is so interesting because it confronts the parents on their own witch wound healing journey. There are so many people who feel unsafe to question materialism, and in previous times that would have literally been a threat to their life to go against what the main culture is saying is correct spiritually. And so I think that this wave of consciousness is also really affecting the parents. And it was so beautiful as listening to the telepathy tapes, how you just said the child you work with felt so heard and seen and understood by you for just believing in her. I think the parents are like having a similar experience because at every level, we're all just like our inner children inside wanting to be heard and seen and understood. And I think that it's really interesting as I was listening to the telepathy tapes about how this is challenging parents to heal their own shadow around spiritual connection and what exists so that they can support their children.
100%. Like, hands down, that is definitely that's what's happening, right? From their parents coming in and being the one seeking Reiki or sound. And then I have actually taught Reiki, certified in Reiki for parents. And that becomes a modality in which they can hold space and calmness for themselves, you know. And I mean, there's so much patience that goes into it, but also we're removing the thoughts of, I need to fix this or how do I fix my child? It's more like, okay, now I have a better understanding of what this energy is and this connection to my own energy as this is happening, but also my child's energy.
And I got full chills when you were like, I got that message that I wasn't here to fix them. I was here to hear them and hold space for them and love them as them. And that was just so powerful when you shared that. And so the idea of teaching parents Reiki is so beautiful and perfect. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit. Like, how can parents of children or people on the spectrum or with learning disabilities, how can they use these spiritual energetic tools to help both their kids and themselves?
So, with the parents, siblings, family, I've had families come in to learn Reiki, right? But the parents, it really becomes this special sacred practice with the meditation, the way they show up, how they begin their day, and the things that they incorporate with their children, which is really beautiful. But I would encourage any form of mindfulness and wellness to be able to feel balanced and centered in how we show up, and also to open and expand our energetic fields to that understanding, right? As we close our eyes and we feel we're in spaces and moments where we feel very vulnerable, that's a way to somewhat identify and relate. And so with Reiki or sound, I love doing sound baths because it's a way to really move that energy and feel without anyone really needing to be in your space, which is very present with the children. There are moments where they do not want anyone in their space. And so I'm back and just doing the sound, but it's that shared experience, right? Why not experience a modality or a therapy that your child is experiencing?
Yeah, I love that. And so, what have been some of the results of this work with the children that you work with?
Yeah. So with the verbal children, I know when I've gone in there, it's been kind of like, well, there's a lot of trauma, actually. There's trauma from experiences going to school in spaces where people don't understand or have the patience, right? And so they have been with people, caregivers, educators who are angry or just lack the empathy or whatever, however that shows up. And so that trust is in not, it's not an immediate thing that shows up. And so over time, it's there. And so, when that space is created, then it becomes a very beautiful relationship that you have. But there's a lot of trauma that you're working through too.
That breaks my heart. That absolutely breaks my heart to hear. And it reminds me of a part on the Telepathy Tapes where one of the guys on that show was witnessing abuse to his little sister and he couldn't do anything. He couldn't speak out. He couldn't save her or help her. And he was like spelling out, I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be the hero. And that's so true. It's a best case scenario that you have a safe home and a caretaker that gets you and somebody who is taking the time to work with you and help you and understand you. And I think, like, especially because this is a global phenomenon, not just here in the States, it's like there's even certain cultures and places in the world where there's less care or available tools. So I think that it's just so sad to think about that. I was severely bullied as a kid. This is like a whole next level of that. And so talk to me about how sound healing can help with that trauma and with that intensity that they hold.
Yeah, I've seen where in the beginning, there's this inability to connect mind and body, right? What one is feeling, like even sensations of hunger or feeling full or just feelings going on in the body. And so through sound, and the Reiki, or even maybe just sound, we arrive at a place where maybe this individual can articulate and know, this does not feel good. I don't like this. Okay, that's fine. We'll move on to the next thing or try something else, or we won't do this. We can stop. So allowing them to know that they have the right to not want something or like something. But the frequency, because the way I'm seeing it and the way it's shown to me is they are of a frequency, right? We all are, we're all energetic beings, but with the sound, that frequency is being met. So I'm just meeting them where they are. So they let me know which bowls they like. Do they like the crystal bowls, the Tibetan bowls? Is it the tuning forks? Is it the rain stick? Which sound resonates with them and feels good to them? And so oftentimes that's a time of rest that they need. So the children will just often drop in quicker than we do and have this deep moment of meditation and rest, which helps them focus. It may even help them in some cases where maybe they're eating more, right? Because they're just able to have more of a mind body connection than before.
That's beautiful. And it's such an interesting idea. That's the disconnect there. It's that like they don't feel fully at home in their own body or aware of their own body. And that's what they talk about in the telepathy tapes too. How even just like having somebody touch their shoulder or something like that can help the spellers like ground in and remember that they can move their arm. It's so interesting because it's so hard for us who are not neurodivergent to really understand that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it does. It offers a lot of grounding. The sound does that. It's just this deep moment of encapsulation of frequency, vibration, which is its own language, right? And so they're being held in that as non-neurodivergent individuals. I know when I'm at a sound bath, I'm like, oh, this is so heavenly. I love this. I don't want it to ever end. So it is very similar to that. But there are also moments too where they're like, okay, that's enough. And I'm like, all right. So, yes, I always meet them where they are and do as much as they're willing to do, never force it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, have you had kids that exemplified those like spiritual gifts? And have you ever encouraged them to explore them more or deepen them? Like for parents out there that have neurodivergent kids or neurotypical kids, and they are showing those traits of deeper spiritual connection, how do you encourage that? And how are you a voice of safety and peace for them in that space?
So, with the children, I will only encourage that if the parents are okay with that. If the parents are spiritual and open to that, that's a discussion we can have. And that's work that we can do in different ways and how we nurture that, right? Because we lose it if we don't nurture it. And if we become fearful of what that is, or it's just something we're suppressing. So, if the parents are okay with it, we have that conversation. But for those parents out there that are open to it and want to really nurture that in their children, ask questions. The curiosity really allows them to explore that, to feel that, and to know that it is something that's part of them, right? I feel like when I look back to my childhood growing up Catholic and just where that was not something that we talked about, I didn't talk about it. So it was like listening to my intuition is something that I had to just put in the back of my mind and lead with that logic and show up in the world in that way. And so now in this space, it's the exact opposite. It's actually like putting the logic aside and letting the intuition lead. So it is exactly that. I'm a mother. And so with the kids, they often, sometimes kids, their minds run wild. And I'm just like, tell me more about that. Let's talk about it. So it's that, it's placing them in spaces where they can meditate, receive sound healing, energy work, things that feel comfortable for the parent and the child.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that idea of getting curious and just making them feel safe to open up and to share. I always say one of the best ways to approach this spiritual work is playful curiosity. And I think that really encapsulates that. What do you wish that people knew about this work? What's a common misconception with neurodivergent children or being in this space?
Yeah, I'll say this again, and I feel like I've said it, but it is that component of where people feel that we have to fix everything. Sometimes things can just be. And as you mentioned earlier, this is like the numbers are higher in the world of neurodivergent children. And I'm a firm believer that they're here to teach us. And that's this evolution of consciousness that's occurring. There are more mediums, there are more people with gifts coming into the world. And so this is yet another way where we are unlearning behaviors, learning new behaviors, and learning how to lean into just being. And I think people need to be okay with that. It's okay to not fix everything. It's okay for us to not all be the same. We're not.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like we were saying in the beginning, like all of our spiritual gifts come through to us differently, and that's by design. Like spirit works through all of us. That was such an interesting part of your story to me is that you're like, yeah, I could do mediumship readings and I am tapped in, but this doesn't feel like my purpose. And for so many people, doing readings for other people feels like the end all be all of the spiritual journey. But like you having that connection to spirit and then going into these spaces to help these kids is how spirit is working through you. And so I think it's a really beautiful idea of we take that connection to spirit, and that doesn't mean that's our purpose so literally. It's like how can we take that and bridge it with where we feel called to serve. So I really liked that part of your story.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I mean, prior to this work, I my life was something completely different, right? Like I worked in corporate spaces and then somehow I just like that big surrender that we do. I did it and I was like, okay, just take me where I'm meant to go. Wherever that is, whatever that looks like, I'm here for it. And so the more I did that, I feel like I've landed where I'm meant to be, but I knew that, yeah, the love readings were not I was like, "This can't I love this, but I don't know, I don't think this is it." Like, I feel like there's something more to this, and my entire story and journey of stepping into the spiritual space and the work that I've done actually has been led and fueled by the loss of my mother, right? And becoming a new mother. So it didn't begin there, but I feel like that's where I started to listen and lean in. So as I experienced that loss and had a birth of my own daughter, it was like I knew there was something connected to the motherhood and the gifts. And I feel like now I'm in it.
Wow. Something about the telepathy tapes that gave me chills was when one of the teaching aides was talking about one of her students trying to get her attention nonverbally and how she just felt this kind of tingling feeling of being watched. Like she could sense that their attention was like staring daggers at her until she went to them, opened up, paid attention. And that just gave me full body chills because there's so many overlaps between this telepathic communication and how the spirit world works. As a medium, listening to the telepathy tapes, I was like, yep, like everything was just like, check, check. That makes perfect sense. And that feeling of like when they want to be heard, they will make their presence known really resonated with me because that's how like spirits are in my readings too. It's, oh, they're standing in, they're staring daggers at me, they're ready. And it was really endearing to me. That's how the like nonverbal autistic child was getting her attention too. And I'm wondering, do they get your attention in nonverbal ways? Or in your experience, have you ever had anything happen like that?
Yes, yes. So there are moments where I may like have my eyes closed and I'm just sitting and maybe doing the Reiki or, or like meditating or hearing. And yeah, much like doing the mediumship readings, I will hear, open your eyes. And I open and then I look up and then there this person is like, okay, that's enough. It's like, all right, we're done with this then, and or so there are moments too. There's one of the students, we're so in tune where I have had days where I'm like, I don't think they will be in school today. Yeah, I don't think so. I just know. I have this knowing. And sure enough, I get there and they are not there. And then when I do see them, they're like, I wanted to call you and tell you, but I don't have your phone number. So it's like I could feel and I knew it was a knowing, I already knew, so it doesn't come at I don't arrive and I'm in like, "Oh my why didn't anyone tell me?" I already had a feeling, I already knew. But just hearing the, "I wanted to reach out to you," is like affirmation, like, "No, I got that. I heard it."
That's so cool. They were like sending you a message because they didn't have your cell phone. I love that. And it's just so interesting in the telepathy tapes too, how spellers from different like places in the world will meet up on the hill and talk with each other and then their parents can like validate that evidence that they know each other and that they would speak about each other. And have there been times where like you and the parents like on separate occasions that you couldn't have known are like getting the same type of information?
Well, I've had moments where one of the parents is very attuned spiritually, and she has let me know like about like past life things with her child. And I'm like, oh, okay. She just shared that with me. And she's like, yeah, she was sharing with. So there are these things where they actually have this communication or this knowing, and I can see actually after she got attuned to Reiki and has been really like tapping into her own spiritual gifts, where she's shared with me, like, I know I'm more in tune with her. I can feel her energy more. And I'm like, that's beautiful. So there are moments like that, but I think in some of the cases with the children, it's where they are verbal, but now they know they're connecting a feeling to what they're speaking about now, which I mean, yeah, we can say it's the Reiki, we can say it's the sound, or just a lot of what they have going on because there's also therapy going on and there's other modes of work that are going into that. But from what I can see from our time together, I'm in awe at what I can witness has, I don't want to say improved, but just the growth of connection.
Yeah. And so the telepathy tapes is out. People are really resonating with it. It's shining light on all of these truths. And what do you, as someone who works in this space, how can people take this information and move forward with it? What would you like to see more of in the world within these spaces?
Yeah, I think that the tapes just really highlight that we're all gifted, right? We are all gifted and have these gifts. They just show up differently for us in different ways. And so it is a birthright to have these gifts. But I just want people to know that these children that are neurodivergent, they're highly gifted. They're special. There's something to them. It's like this light. Actually, while I'm doing the work, I can see this light in them. And they should be able to have access to different modalities outside of just therapy. The schools and different spaces should support different methods of modalities to help them with that, with their gifts, whether it's sound, whether it's Reiki, whatever it is. I think that it should be more accessible. And I don't think we need like the scientific method to validate that. I think it's an experience that's being had by more than many people all over the world. So how can we deny it?
Yeah, it's the proof is the experience of everybody who's reporting their growth and healing. And I just got an image as you were talking of just like these things in the future being incorporated into like high school after school programs and things like that. Like we have sports, we have theater, we have the arts. Like, why can't we have Reiki or sound healing or meditation or mindfulness practices more available too?
Yeah, I do mindfulness summer camps. I do sound and mindfulness in schools. And so I've been really pushing to get more of that out there, especially in underserved communities with children of color, because when it comes to these modalities, they are expensive. Right? They're in these like fancy spaces and places. I'm in and located in Berkeley and in Oakland, and I offer sound baths for children, and so we need more of that. We need more people that are willing to do this. And it doesn't have to be like at $500, right? Or more. It should be where people can afford it.
Absolutely. That's such amazing work that you're putting out into the world. And can you tell our audience about East Bay Healing House and how they can work with you and find you?
Yeah, so I'm in Berkeley. I do work in Berkeley and Oakland with schools one on one. And so the East Bay Healing House is a collective space with other practitioners where you can come for sound, for Reiki, for readings, massage, you name it. And we're doing the work there. But in terms of going to schools and working with children, I offer sound baths for children. I offer one on one work with children, doing holistic therapy, sound, mindfulness. And so it does look different in schools, right? I have to be mindful. Not everyone's open to the Reiki, which is fine. But yeah, I'm just here to help. And I want it for everyone, but as a woman of color, I do really want to get all of this out for children of color, for underserved communities. I am probably one of the only ones going to the schools where they don't have this and they don't have access to this, and introducing this to them in their after school program, in their special education departments, in their summer enrichment programs, and really trying to push to get it out there. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested or you want to come in, let me know. I'm here for it.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Adriana. You're such an earth angel and doing such important work. And just thank you so much for being here and sharing your light with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me and allowing me to talk about this. These tapes were so heartwarming to listen to. Yeah, so thank you.
They really were. I know that this conversation will help so many. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit. For those of you who are new to the podcast, this is the part of the podcast where I connect with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in the spirit world, and give the messages for the collective. As always, with anything in life, take what resonates with you. It's what you're meant to carry and leave the rest. And if you know somebody who might benefit from the messages, please send them their way. So, before we get into sitting with spirit today, I wanted to talk about something that was really cool. So, I'm on my own mediumship journey, which, if you're a listener of the pod and if you are new to the podcast, check out my Life at the Real Life Hogwarts episodes. Those are the Arthur Findlay College episodes where I talk about my mediumship development journey. And so, mediumship development is basically, it has almost nothing to do with learning to connect more with the spirit world and everything to do with learning to actually trust what you're getting and getting out of your own way and doing less. Like, mediumship development is not about doing more, it's always about doing less. And that's what I'm really learning is like this nervous system regulation of being okay in the unknown, for my mind to not try to jump in and try to make a story out of something. But I was chatting with my mediumship mentor today. I feel like mediumship mentorship is such a mouthful. I try my best. I'm hanging on for dear life right now. So I've, been on this mediumship development journey. I feel like I'm always learning a deeper layer of trust with the spirit world. And for those of you that don't know what mediumship is, it's connecting with our past loved ones on the other side. I'm an evidential medium, which basically means giving evidence of life after physical death and then giving messages from our loved ones. So I've been really working on deepening the trust in my mediumship. And I've been so frustrated lately because there have been a couple connections where it's like, I'm not saying exactly what they're telling me. I'm like interpreting it or wanting to attach a story to it. And then I'm like, okay, this isn't quite right. The person's like, I'm not sure what they mean by that. And then I actually just get out of the way and say exactly exactly what they're giving me. And they're like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So today I was working on that with my mentor, and she was like, okay, we're going to do an exercise where I give you no validation. You're just going to like just continue to flow with exactly where the power is taking you, with exactly where the spirit world is taking you. I'm not going to say yes or no, and you're just going to go for like 10 to 15 minutes. So I was like, okay, I actually love that. So in that exercise, I started connecting with a great aunt in spirit and just started going. I knew she was on the mother's side. I knew it was a great aunt. I got her personality, blah, blah, blah. So it got to this part where she was like, I have 3 kids. And then in the 3 kids, she highlighted one boy. So if I wasn't doing this exercise, and I had a sitter there saying yes, no, maybe, I don't know, then they would have said no, because she actually had 2 boys and 1 girl, but she was highlighting one boy. So then about 1 minute later, the power starts to shift and I'm taking to a boy in the spirit world. And he was showing me that he was with that great aunt in spirit and that they were very similar. And he was showing me evidence of who he was. And it turns out that was the one boy she was highlighting. He was in the spirit world with her, and he was the next person to talk. So, in retrospect, like the spirit world knew exactly what it was doing, highlighting that one boy, because this is somebody, this was like the sitter's like second cousin that she barely knew. But because they highlighted one boy of the 3 kids and then went to him, she understood who I was talking to and could, at the end, validate everything I was saying about him living in a log cabin and him dealing with this XYZ thing. The evidence that I gave made sense. So that was like such an example of what I'm learning about trust and surrender. And sometimes, like, validation can almost get in the way of where the spirit world is taking you, because sometimes we think that what they were saying was, oh, she only had one boy out of the 3 kids. But that's not what they said. She was highlighting one boy and then it went to that boy. And in retrospect, who was a man like, that I was connecting with, and in retrospect, it made perfect sense why the spirit world was working that way and why they were leading me that way. And it also just tied so beautifully into the exercise of trusting the flow of spirit and trusting what you're getting. And so I think for anybody developing, it's like feeling safe in the nose. If the sitter doesn't understand right away, or it's like, and you feel that yes from the spirit world and you feel really connected and you're sure of what you're giving, then try to just flow with that and trust in the bigger picture. They might be directing you in a way that will make sense in retrospect. And that's like where so much of the magic comes from, is those are like the emails that you get a month later. Like, I spoke to my mom and actually this message did make sense that I didn't understand. So that's where I'm really at in my development journey, where I'm really working on just trusting more. And it was really interesting because my mentor was like, I would have said no to that, but because of the exercise, I didn't. And then I was like, oh, now I see what they were saying by that one boy. So it was just a really cool moment.
That's so cool. What a great exercise too, to like trust yourself and play and not have like parameters, you know? And as always, I feel like that's like a great lesson for life too. It's like really learning to trust ourselves, even if maybe if our logical brain thinks, oh, this is the right path, but there's that inner knowing that's like, no, I think you should take this chance and go left, or whatever the example is. Like really trusting ourselves in that unknown and not needing the answer to continue to trust.
Yes, it's such a map for all of life. And I feel like the reason I felt called to share this on Sitting with Spirit today is that time is a necessary ingredient to understanding. And like in that exercise, it came within the next 5 minutes. But sometimes in life, it's like the spirit world, our angels, our guides, they almost plant these little Easter eggs that when you look backwards on them, you're like, oh, like the signs were there all along. But I think that we're in this moment, like collectively right now, of so much change on the individual and collective level. And I think that this story of like trust and timing and letting things unfold and following the power, even if it doesn't make sense yet to your logical brain, like following where you are being led and letting that evolution take its own shape. And I think that's such a freeing place to be. And I think that's really what life is. And any inkling or thinking that we're in control is truly just an illusion.
Yes, absolutely. It's so true. And like you said, the real magic is in that unknown. The real magic is in that trust and like following the breadcrumbs and not needing to have the answer. Because often the answer we have is like a limited possibility because we don't have all the
Yeah.
possibilities. And so, yeah, that's just such a beautiful practice. Something I'm gonna be thinking about all day.
Yeah. And sometimes on our intuitive mediumship journey, we think we know what the person needs more. And it's like then we get in the way of what the spirit world actually wants to tell them. And so I think that's also an element of like intuitive development and trust. And as I'm fleshing out this mentorship container that I'm going to create and this intuitive development container that I'm working on, this is like a big lesson. And I'm going to have some really good exercises working on this. But it's just exactly like we were saying. It's also sometimes us being like, we know what we need. And our angels and guides being like, no, we know what you need. And you need to let go a little bit. And so it's just so interesting to see that reflected in the micro of a client session or a mentorship session where spirit just shows how smart they are and how there's just such a beauty and a relaxing into that trust. And so I think sometimes, we're like, well, I'm connecting with this person in the spirit world. Like, for example, at an earlier phase of my development, if I was connecting with that great aunt and then the powers starting to take me to a male presence stepping in, I'd be like, wait, no, I'm connecting with the great aunt. Like, why am I going there? But I flowed into her son, which was an important part. And then they came through at the end and had a very similar message about like speaking your truth and like how they weren't good at verbalizing emotions. And they came in together and wove in. And it's just up to us to literally receive and follow. The basic message here is just do less. It's all figured out. Our guides know what's going on. Our higher self knows what's going on. And our thinking ego brain just really needs to do less.
I always say that about myself and everything. I'm like, I could do like 10% less and it would be plenty. Like I think we can all just do a little bit less. And then when we do that, we allow space for the unknown, space for something magical that we couldn't even dream up. If we're doing it all ourselves, then there's no room for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just wanted to share that little anecdote because it was very meaningful to me. And if you're on your own intuitive development journey or just your own journey and trusting your angels and guides and higher self, I hope that you can take this as a reminder to lean into trust, to do less, and to flow, not force. So, starting to get into the messages for the week, immediately when I started tuning in, I felt this like restless energy. Like it felt really hard to sit still. It felt really hard to get quiet. It just feels like there's this kind of antsy energy. Like I just wanted to move and fidget and distract and avoid and numb and stay busy. And so, that's always a kind of tough, energetic space to be in because it's not super congruent with the stillness and the silence that allows for our higher self to speak. And so, with this, as I started to continue to feel in, I felt like there were layers of discomfort. So, it's like layers of fear and discomfort. And I almost got this feeling of the fear right now creating a domino effect. Like, if that's true, then what does it mean about this and this? And what does it mean about that? And what does it mean about the future? And I feel like it's this moment where there's just layers upon layers where it's like we understand one layer, but then that brings up a lot of other layers that we need to look at. And it just feels like that might get overwhelming a little bit. And you might get lost in kind of the quagmire of this experience of detangling all of the fears. And that's really contributing to that restless energy. And so I saw writing as a really important tool, like journaling, writing, maybe pulling a card, because I felt like when the crown chakra block gets that way, where it's like, okay, I understand one layer, but now here's another layer, or things feel like they're adding up. Writing is a really important tool for that, where it's like, okay, I just need to journal it out because when it's living in my head, it's like this tennis match going back and forth of my thoughts. And I just need to get it out. I need to give it to my angels. I need to release it from here so that the message can be received and I can move on. Because when it stays in our mental realms without being expressed or written down, it just keeps replaying on a loop until we get the message. So I feel like instead of fidgeting binge watching TV, staying restless, avoiding things. Like there's just a deeper invitation to sit with the triggers, to sit with the discomfort, and to like journal and write about it. That being said, after that, I started feeling all of that build up in the crown chakra, which is very common. I feel like, especially in this time period, there's so much going on. There's a lot of fear and anxiety and worry. But then I felt my crown chakra getting really hot and this like phoenix energy. And I got this message saying that our spiritual evolution is being powered by this time period and all of the fear, not in spite of it, but because of it. And that the versions of self that we are called to be right now, of like so grounded and powerful and strong in an authenticity, community, truth, having our own back, working out our own stuff so that we can show up collectively. It's like that is this like beautiful sort of rebirth through the fire element, where it's like we see all these things going, we're being triggered by things on the collective, we're being triggered by things externally that's triggering things internally that need to be looked at, and that this is actually by design for humanity's consciousness right now, that these exact challenges that we're facing are actually exactly what we need to wake up, to evolve, to identify what isn't working, and to heal a deeper layer. And this is like a really important message that our angels and guides wanted to give, is that they don't want us to feel hopeless. Like on the individual scale, we can believe the fear is truth, or we can take fearful stories about and incorporate them as a story of identity. Like, I'm just this type of person, or this always happens to me. They don't want us to do that on a collective level. Like, humanity is just this, humanity will always be that, the world will always look like that. It's like that's the macro version of that pattern. But actually, this discomfort in the collective right now is exactly what humanity needs for an evolution in consciousness. And the more that we ground into that and do our own work, the more it helps the collective. And that felt like a very important message to give. So I also saw fear showing up like a domino board, where it's kind of like one person's fear triggers another person's fear, triggers another person's fear, until it has this like domino effect. But if we can be the domino pieces that will not get toppled by fear, will not lean into this massive panic or hysteria, if we can stand in our power and our rootedness, it stops the domino effect and it doesn't have anywhere else to go. And it gives other people strength too. So we're working on really just standing in our strength right now in the face of adversity, on the collective and the individual. And with that, I saw the symbol of the North Node. And the North Node is like what we're here to do, what we came here to learn, who we came here to be. And I got this feeling that like right now is a North Node activation time, where a lot of like karmic lessons are coming up, a lot of like relationships with people that we've done this dance before with are playing out. This is just a moment where there's extra emphasis on who we came here to be and what we came here to do. And that like this time is shaping us like in terms of our purpose, and to pay attention to the major themes right now. I also really want to say, going back to that domino message, that for some people, there's also this message here about family systems and sort of like domino effects of toxicity or abuse or boundary crossing that are like just a part of the way the pattern is set up, where it's like, do, 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 do. We all do our song and dance. Like, I topple into you, you topple into me, we go like that. And I feel like there's also a message just on the individual scale of not participating in that anymore and being like the domino in the stack that doesn't topple over. And that's like changing a dynamic in a family. So just wanted to share that too. The next thing I saw was actually octopus as an animal guide. And I always love when octopus comes up as an animal guide, because there's lessons around like doing a bunch of stuff at once. And in retrospect, that kind of makes sense with the restless energy I was feeling around the week. But octopus can come in a moment where it's literally I have 8 hands in different things, just like doing everything at once, holding everything at once. And there's just this sense of coming back to balance, taking care of yourself, not letting the energy get too frenetic that it becomes diluted, like checking in with yourself, staying conscious. There's also, like, with octopus as an animal guide, I saw the Libra symbol coming up, which is my sign for love, balance, and relationships. So I also feel like for some people, the message is going to be like, look into where you're doing everything for everyone, where you're juggling a million different hats, where within relationships there might be imbalances, because that's also really coming up thematically. I want to go into the mediumship now because I had the most beautiful spirit come through. I had a gentleman in spirit. He was just like the most kind, lovable, like, he had the most infectious laugh. I felt like he would have always been surrounded by women. Like, he either had a lot of sisters or just a lot of women relatives around him, and he felt very comfortable with that. I also saw like prominent dimples, and I felt like that would have been something very identifying with him. And I saw that he was just a very good hearted guy. Like, not one person had a problem with him. Like, he was just that guy that's kind of like, "Are you an earth angel in disguise? Like, why are you always so happy? Why are you always so kind?" Like, just really loving. I felt like he passed young. I want to say like 20s, maybe early 30s. That's the range I'd put him in. And I saw a connection to the number 7. So that felt to me like it could have been July or the 7th of a month or maybe even 7 kids, but there would be a prominent connection to the number 7 with him. And then he also showed me that he was like very big into church and Christianity and community within the church. And I felt like that church is also where there would be like a lot of women around him. And I saw a connection to him being in like some sort of marching band type of thing. So I don't know if that would have been in high school, but there was something there with like marching band, music, instruments. I felt like he would have had a weak heart, like a heart problem, and would like struggle for breath sometimes, kept bringing me to the heart. And this is where we get into his message here. And he was very adamant about this because his faith meant a lot to him. Is that true Christianity is based in love, community, service, and lifting each other up. Anything else doesn't have the privilege to be associated with Christ's name. That was his message today. Is that true Christianity is based in love. Anything else does not have the right to use Christ's name because it is not Christianity. And he felt very powerful about this. And he felt like that's where he would get angry. Like this earth angel energy that I felt around him, it feels like maybe he wouldn't get angry for his own sake, but he gets angry for people that he sees being hurt. And he gave me this feeling of like, stop hiding, stop pretending, stop going along with these things that you know are wrong in your heart, especially for those of you that are part of organized religions that you see doing harm on a massive scale, because that is not the way and that is not the truth. That's not true Christianity. And he's saying this needs to be reclaimed. Christianity needs to be reclaimed because it's dispersed into something. And he feels very passionate about that in the spirit world because he really took Christ's teachings literally and he tried to help people. He was such a light and his faith meant so much to him. And he doesn't want people to feel scared or gaslit or like they have to hide their critiques. It's like more important than ever for Christianity to be reclaimed. That's his real message here. Be good, be love. And so this is so interesting, but he brought me to this Marianne Williamson quote that I read last night that says, "When hate screams, love cannot afford to whisper." And I feel like that is where he's going to, is like the hate is screaming. We cannot afford to whisper. We cannot afford for our faith, and I'm speaking as him now, to be commandeered by something that does not have the right to use Christ's name. So that's a very important message. And I think that for any of you hummingbirds listening who are Christian or Christian witches or come from those backgrounds or any faith that you see making a mockery of divine love and divine consciousness, and that is losing its way, it's up to us to stand up for that and to stand up for true wisdom and true, like, loving God, goddess consciousness. So that's his real message here, because he feels like what he's showing me is that a lot of people in the churches are starting to really wake up, and that there's like this feeling of we have to be more vocal about this. There's also another quote that Marianne Williamson said that I feel called to share and close out Sitting with Spirit with. And that quote is, "Democracy dies in the darkness and in the shadow. Tyranny dies in the light." And that's what's so important too, is that when we feel like we have to hide our wisdom, our sense of right and wrong, and our truth, that's how democracy dies. That's how like love doesn't win. And when tyranny is actually, there's a light shined on it and we see what's going on and it's exposed, that's how that dies. So it's so up to us in this moment. And this beautiful spirit person keeps really sharing this with me, that like we have to stick up for what's right. We have to be warriors for love and to remind people what true, we have to call things by the appropriate name. Like we cannot call hate Christianity, because it is so not Christ-like or in Christ consciousness.
Yes, that is such a powerful message. I'm grateful that you shared it and that he came through and shared it. And I think something that really stuck with me about it too, I know for a lot of us in this moment, it can feel really overwhelming and you can feel powerless. It sounds cliche, but the power of love is always within our power. And the more deeply we love ourselves and all of the people around us, like that is such a powerful force. And I think sometimes we can forget that or diminish how deeply that is felt, but we really have that power in the face of hate, in the face of tyranny, to express our love ever more deeply for this beautiful world and for each other. And so if you are feeling lost or powerless, like I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think like in this time period, calling a spade is so important, because there's so many like smoke and mirrors and trickery and manipulation. And I just think we're in this moment now where we can't let things slide. We have to like really be intentional with our words. And that's part of shining the light on things, revealing these things that are not in congruence with the words that are labeling them, and getting particular about that and reclaiming these terms that have been bastardized in the process.
The word reclaim was coming into my head right as you said it. Yes, like reclaiming these beautiful practices that are now being used. Shout out Magic Hour mug.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, I love it.
I love it.
I don't know who I think I am, just casually sipping on it.
Sorry for that brief interlude to shout out our beautiful mug from Taylor's Aunt. But yeah, so important. We have the power to reclaim these things that are a force of good in our world, and we get to recreate them in that image because all of those things exist within humanity. We create them and we sustain them. So calling them out, reclaiming them for the practice that they always were meant to be, of love and service and connection and stewardship of our earth and each other. We have the power to reclaim that. And like you said, call a spade and stand up for what is right and stand up for each other.
Yeah. And that's what this beautiful spirit person was saying, is that like he sees all of these groups of people who are like complaining about it in the shadows, or kind of feeling like something is off, feeling like they're frustrated with their communities or the systems around them. And I feel like that's the message here too, is like, well, then speak up, like create community that is aligned, then leave that community and create one for like-minded people that understand and are rooted in love. So that's where I feel like where we're starting to wake up, we're starting to see things that aren't working, we're seeing things that are not congruent with what they say they are, and it's time for us to like clearly label that and create community that is, and use our voices.
There's always hope when we have those powers at our fingertips. We are the hope and we just have to reclaim that.
Yes, I love that. So, thank you so much to this beautiful spirit that had that powerful message. And I'm just so happy that we have each other and we have the hummingbird community and that we have this place to come back to every week to remind us of the magic in the world because we are here. And I really, truly believe in my heart that there are more of us in alignment with love, but that we can't afford to whisper while hate screams.
Yes, such a beautiful message. So grateful for all of you and for you, Taylor.
Yeah. Well, have a beautiful rest of your week. And I love you too, Claire. And I love you too, hummingbirds. And we'll see you next week.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. If you review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we'll add your name twice. And if you share the podcast on your Instagram story and tag us, we'll add your name a 3rd time. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 222 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page. Remember, you are magic.